All right, let's dive right in. Today we're going to tackle one of the most famous and honestly one of the most misunderstood instructions about prayer in the entire Bible. It's just a single verse, but wow, has it sparked centuries of debate.
And here it is, Matthew chapter 6, verse 7. This is a direct quote from Jesus, and he's warning against heaping up empty phrases. Now, on the surface, that seems pretty simple, right? Don't just repeat yourself over and over. But is that really the whole story?
And this, right here, is where things get complicated. For a lot of people, this verse seems to be a direct shot at structured, repetitive prayers. The Rosary is probably the most famous example. It's a question that can really create a divide. So what's the real deal?
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to do a little detective work. We've got to go back to the source, back to the original language and the world Jesus was speaking to, because that's where the real meaning starts to open up.
Okay, so the original Greek word that Jesus used is batologisane. Now this is super interesting. This word doesn't just mean to repeat, not at all. It's much closer in meaning to stammering or babbling. Just mindlessly rattling off words that have totally lost their meaning.
So who is doing this kind of babbling? Well, Jesus points his finger directly at the Gentiles. Back then, a lot of pagan prayer practices were all about quantity. It was about reciting these super long lists of divine names, thinking that the sheer volume of words could somehow twist a god's arm. It was all about manipulation. And Jesus just completely flips that on its head. He says, hey, your Father knows what you need before you even ask. See, the point isn't to inform God or wear him down. The whole relationship is different.
And that little detail, it changes everything. It shifts the entire focus away from the action, the physical act of repeating, and puts it squarely on the attitude of the person praying. It's not about what your mouth is doing, it's about what your heart is doing.
So here's the absolute heart of the matter. A prayer isn't vain because the words are repeated. A prayer becomes vain when the heart is empty, when it just turns into this mechanical, robotic exercise that's totally disconnected from any real faith or love or attention.
There's a great line that says, a prayer is heard, not on the number of words, but on the fervor of our souls. That's it right there. The value isn't measured in word count, it's measured in that sincerity, that passion. The real question is, are we actually there when we're praying, or are we just going through the motions?
Okay, but this is where it gets really fascinating. Because if all repetition were bad, you'd expect the Bible to be completely free of it, right? But when you actually look, you find the exact opposite. The Bible itself makes a powerful case for what you could call holy repetition.
And we're not just talking about a one-off thing here. It's a clear pattern. From the Psalms all the way to the highest heavens, meaningful repetition is shown as a totally legitimate and even powerful way to worship. Let's look at a few examples. This might be the most powerful piece of evidence of all. At his most agonizing moment in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus himself prayed to the Father 3 times, and the Bible makes a point of telling us he was saying the same words. I mean, if Jesus did it, he clearly wasn't condemning the practice itself.
And it's not just an earthly thing. The book of Revelation gives us this incredible peek into heavenly worship. And what do we find? We see angels surrounding God's throne, and what are they doing? They're repeating, day and night, holy, holy, holy. This is the model for perfect, non-stop prayer. And guess what? It's repetitive.
So what's with the number 26? Well, that is how many times the phrase, "For his steadfast love endures forever," is repeated in a single biblical prayer, Psalm 136. Think about that. Every single one of its 26 verses ends with that exact same line. It's this powerful, meditative, and very repetitive prayer.
So when you pull all of these threads together, you start to see a much deeper, much richer picture of what prayer is all about, one that goes way beyond just a simple reading of one verse.
So let's boil it all down one last time. What is vain repetition? It's that mindless babbling from a disengaged heart. It's the prayer that's trying to manipulate God or just check a box. And what isn't it? It's not the sincere repetition of words, whether that's holy, 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 or the prayers of the Rosary that are used to focus our minds and lift our hearts up in devotion. Because in the end, the key was and always is the intention.
And that really just leaves us with a final thought, a question to take with us. It's not really about whether we repeat our prayers, but how we pray them. So how can we make sure that our prayer, whatever form it takes, is always coming from a place of sincerity, that it's a true surge of the heart? Now that's the real challenge.